piano teachers, we must stay on a tight schedule. Some of you may know I was Emily's piano professor. I teach at Yale High College. And if any of you look at my Facebook page where it says about me, it says my fingers tell my story. So I will let my fingers say a little something. I'd like to start by really commending you on your chosen field. Did you know that most people who are not musicians are miserable in their professions? This is something I have found out. I learned this when I was playing organ for a church in a very wealthy town. I mean, these people had so much money. It was incredible, and I was the lowly organist coming in to get my little check. And they would say, at least you love what you're doing. Also, as a concert pianist, I meet many people that tell me they could have, or they have a brother or sister or cousin or somebody who could have, but they didn't. So I always tell my students at Yavapai College, don't be somebody who could have, be somebody that did, and you will never regret it. We are all here today because we are people who did. I see many adults glorifying themselves with expensive possessions, vices, substance abuse. I feel that music has shielded me from these. You probably have all heard of Alexander Malopev, a wonderful Prodigy Now adult. And in an interview, he was asked if he prefers vodka or beer. And guess what his answer was? I prefer piano. There is always something to think about, something stimulating, new challenges, something to work on when alone, something to be satisfied with at the end. And enjoying the process is renewed every time we teach a student. Though I sometimes hear it said that classical music is waning, I feel with social media, the popularity of classical music has increased. Being able to share and hear others playing is inspiring. On some forums, it has been hypothesized that digital pianos will replace acoustic ones. Interestingly, almost all my students at Yavapai College practice on electronic instruments, and all of them have told me that they aspire to buy an acoustic piano as soon as they're able to. And speaking of Morgan, she just bought one. She's not rich. She saved up hard-earned money to buy a beautiful upright piano. When I was a little girl, I wanted to be a piano teacher. My mom wanted me to be a famous concert pianist. I have since become a piano teacher, and I give concerts. I'm not famous. But the two things, that was my mom's agenda, by the way. The two things really enhance each other, and that's what I would like to talk about. Lessons, sometimes call this talk lessons from the stage. When we teach, we are like music doctors and magicians. We need to figure out why we sound better than the student. And it may start very simply, student played a wrong note. They played a wrong rhythm. After that is corrected, does the student sound as good as you sound? Probably not. Are you feeling the music while they are not? Most likely, will we simply hope the student will suddenly begin to feel the music? That is not likely anytime soon. Why does feeling the music make it sound better? Are you physically doing something differently when you feel the music? This is where our exploration begins. But one of the things I really want to emphasize is so many times when we perform, we'll be like, I did this wrong. Next time I'll correct that, or I don't like the way I did this. But it's equally important to say, I did this well. What made it good? So I can do it again the next time. When you are in the practice room, what should be happening? You should be on a mission to make things sound more beautiful and to develop more ease in playing. The practice room is actually your laboratory where you will try things to that end. Slow practice is important because it is more likely to be mindful. This is a really important word, mindful. And I think it's really important because so many times when a student is learning, they have to be mindful because they're trying to read a note. And then after they can do that, they say, no, I don't need to go slow anymore. And they go on autopilot, and I suppose that could be a little phase, I hope a very short phase, and then you have to bring mindfulness back in so that you are controlling every finger and what you want to do musically. From my teaching, I noticed that students who played perfectly at tempo at lessons who were only practicing fast failed at the recital. I got to the point where I could predict some seemingly perfectly prepared students that were going to slip. Mindfulness, very important word. My daughter just yesterday shared a story of forgetting her phone's passcode. She always did her passcode on autopilot. And then one day she just woke up and she couldn't think of what it was. So again, it's just like if you're playing, a piece by memory and you're just going on autopilot, you can forget it just as easily as you memorized it. So again, mindfulness. Because of mindfulness, I don't believe in habits. It's just like when you have school vacation, you're not going to get in your car and drive to school because you are mindful. Your brain will tell you that today you are going to go to Phoenix or someplace else. So I believe that when any of these fine professors here tell you to change something in your playing from that day forth, you can change it. One of the questions that I have been asking my students is, what is the purpose of the piano lesson? Do you have any thoughts on that? What is the purpose of the piano lesson? Well, some of my little students said, well, it's to learn a new song. And I told them that it's to learn how to practice at home. Have you noticed that when you practice with a student in a half an hour, the piece is achieved to mastery? Yet when they take it home and they fiddle with it for a week, there's not much of a result. What is the first thing that should happen as you or your student practices? The very first thing, any thoughts? Listening. Listening, this is a really important one. It may surprise you to know that listening needs to be taught. And for example, when I was a little girl, my mother would say, you will practice from 3 to 4, and your brother will practice from 4 to 5. So I would get on the piano bench, and I would bring the Bobbsey Twins book with me, and put it in the piano bench. When my mother left, I would take it out, and in the meantime, I found out the mystery story, what happened next. And in retrospect, this was a complete waste of time. So the difference between listening and hearing is concentration. It's like I hear, I think maybe the lights, but I'm not listening to them. Whatever you are listening to when you play is what your audience will hear. There's something that's transmitted through when you are really listening to something. For example, we were just talking about my student Ezra that I hope will come here, and he was working on the BWV 850 that Emily was working on, and he was playing all the voices, but he was not listening for them. Yet when he began to listen to all the voices, I could then also hear the voices. So anything that you're experiencing, we will experience. And if you are not experiencing it, or if you are getting bored or don't like your playing, then yeah, that's not going to be so good. And along those same lines, I used to have a student that would come 2 o'clock on Wednesdays. She was a good student in a lot of ways, in that she was 9 years old and she was already playing Beethoven sonatinas and some of Opus 49. But whenever she came, I found myself literally falling asleep. So that was the first student of the day. So I was like, okay, I don't drink coffee, but I think it's time to start. So I would get out my coffee before she came, and I'd be like, okay, I'm ready for this. Nothing. The next week, coffee and a chocolate bar. Nothing. The week after, coffee and a chocolate during her lesson. And that day, she played a wrong note, and I walked over to her music and I said, can you please show me where you just were, because I want to circle that. And she said, Ms. Rose, I have absolutely no idea where I'm playing. And that was a revelation to me, because that is when I realized that she had zoned out and she was zoning me out. So I proceeded to teach her to listen to herself. I said, listen so hard that your mind cannot go to anything else. And then I proceeded to teach that to my other students, and all of a sudden lessons became stimulating. No more coffee, no more chocolates. And sometimes, you know, when little kids come, they have all these things that happened in their day. They're coming straight from school, and I will let them sometimes get it out, you know, whatever it is on their mind, so they can then, you know, proceed and focus. Let's think about what attracted us to music in the first place. Was it simply because we heard something hard? Or was it because we heard something beautiful? My thought is that we were amazed, that we were moved by something that was incredibly beautiful. Your task as a teacher is to continuously ask that question. As you answer that, even in the most basic levels, skip something here. What makes something beautiful? Your task as a teacher is to continuously ask that question. What made that beautiful? And as you begin to answer that question with your students, you will play more mindfully, and your starting point before the inspiration of the audience will be higher. So I'm talking about having a plan, but I'm not talking about now we have the plan and now we just stick to it. That is your springboard for, you know, when your friends come in and your audience is there and you get moved by the moment, you already have something that's quite beautiful to springboard from. As the student learns to make his first 2 notes beautiful, he will be on the first rung of the ladder to make more and more beautiful sounds. We must emphasize to our students that the piano does not make noises. I've heard kids say to me, they refer to the piano sound, they call it a noise. And that's very disturbing. I've also had a little girl tell me that she signed up for piano because she liked the idea of pushing buttons. And don't lose heart, she did become a competition winner. But I think it's important for them to know right from the get-go, it's much more than that. Often, we may hear pop music that isn't necessarily musically valuable, but when sung very musically, the song gets absolutely sold. When I think of Celine Dion and the Titanic song, when I was teaching that kind of, hand-to-hand melody version to one of my students, I was like, there's really not that much here, but when Celine sings it, it's awesome. So, case in point. Things for students to explore. Where are the phrases? How many bars in each phrase? Shall we inflect the phrase? Where does it rise? Where does it fall? How about the section? Does the section have a rise and fall? Do you hear different harmonies? How does that affect your playing of them? How are you approaching the keys? One of the things I have learned from decades of teaching is that we all have something to learn from somebody else. Each one of us has something that the other could benefit from. All this put together would make the most amazing pianist of all. Some sight read well, some have great ears, some have a supple hand, some have spontaneity, some are very structured. What is your piano superpower? What do your friends bring to the table? I'm sure that Professor Negrutiu and Dr. Wachter and Dr. Fincher could tell you what your strengths are. In graduate school, I was finally told I was built well for the piano. What a surprise. I was always self-conscious of my disproportionately large hands and arms. Now I am grateful for them. They may not be beautiful, but I can play. One of the things that I have learned from my students is that they do not have a concept of what practice is and how it works. When I was teaching group piano via Zoom, when COVID started, I asked the students to keep a practice log. I kept one as well, in which I would share my daily progress on learning. In this case, it was an organ piece because the organ is a newer instrument in my life. So I thought it would be a little more relatable. And so I was trying to play a Bach trio on the organ. And I shared with them that on the first day of practicing it, it took me 45 minutes to read through it. It's really hard. Then I went back and I practiced hands alone, hands and feet, for about 15 minutes. And at the end of that time, I felt like I was getting somewhere. But when I came back the next day, it felt like I had never played it before. So, again, I repeated the process, and at the end of the hour, I felt like I was getting somewhere. And this went on for quite a few days. And then at about the 5th day, at the end of the practice, I played through it. It sounded good. I was excited. I came back the next day. Do you think it sounded good? No. You have to keep doing the maintenance work and you have to keep building it up. So anyway, I shared this story with my students and it really surprised them because they always felt like, well, I practiced it. I'm not getting it. I practiced it. And so I felt like that was a helpful thing for me to share with them. When I was a college student, I was giving a recital. And my final piece was to be one I believe you have heard very recently with Dr. Negrutiu. My final piece was a Liszt B minor sonata. I'm sorry I couldn't make it to your recital. It was several weeks before my recital. The B minor sonata still needed some work. But that was okay, there's still a few more weeks. I came to my lesson, and my teacher announced he will be on tour the next few weeks. Good luck with your recital, he said. I was mortified. The day of the recital arrived. I was also playing the Italian Concerto, Beethoven Opus 7, and the Bach Busoni Chaconne. The Bach Busoni I had played several times already, so I wasn't worried about that one. Mistake. Always worry, because that's the one that's going to have some kind of little mistake in it. So, anyway, it was 6 o'clock the night of the recital. The recital's at 8:15. I just finished practicing in the hall, and I could not play the Liszt B minor sonata. And I called my mother, and I was crying, I was hysterical, I was like, I've got to kill myself because there's no way out of this. I have to play it, and it's the whole second half, I can't play any of it, and what am I gonna do? So, the recital went on, the first half went very well, and then it was time for the second half. Something really unbelievable happened. I still can't even believe it. Suddenly, I was nailing it while playing with great passion and expression. I played the last note of the sonata. I got up to bow, and I could hear the crowd cheering wildly. They were on their feet. And in the audience that evening were many Juilliard graduates who were friends of my teacher that were supposed to report back to him on how I did. They went through the receiving line. They said, "We are going to tell Joseph Villa that you were amazing." So my vision of myself grew a few sizes that evening. I was like, I am just so good. I sent my audio of the Liszt Sonata to a prestigious competition. Now, in those days, there were very, very few competitions. So this competition was an opportunity. I was very excited to receive a prompt reply stating that I was moving to the next round in person. Yay. It was a miracle I had played so amazingly at the recital. It was still rough when I was practicing it, but I was confident that when it counts, I come through. I showed up to the competition and I began to play. What do you think happened?
One of two things.
Go ahead, say it. It was a flop. I could not play it. I never could play it. Somehow I got help from above the day of the recital. But I did not know how to play it. I did not know how I did it. I didn't know what my hands were doing in that moment of inspiration. How was I sitting? What was my position? What was I thinking about? All these things, they were so important. And I played the opening octaves and I just totally blew it. I mean, it was horrific, and I just fled the stage. And organizers followed me out and they said, "What happened? On the basis of your audio, you are going to be the first prize." And that stung very, very badly. I wanted that prize so badly. I learned something invaluable that day at a very high price. That was the day I realized that when I am playing well, I need to know what and how I am doing it so that I can be a reliable performer. So my worst performance is still a good one. So I decided to dedicate my life to really analyzing what makes a good thing good. I spent decades analyzing myself and also noticing with students, when is it good, when is it bad, what is not happening when it's bad, what is happening when they're doing it well. You need to know what you are doing. then you can play and enjoy. If you are enjoying your performance, which is hard to do sometimes, your audience will enjoy it. It's that transmission that I was talking about. By teaching, you will become more aware of what makes something good. Remember that a pianist is like every member of, shall we say, the New York Philharmonic put together. And we need to be controlling every voice, just like that viola player that goes home and practices his line, and he's shaping it and doing the right vibrato and everything, so that when he comes together, his part is a beautiful part of the equation. So, as you're practicing for these things, then you will be able to take those things to the concert bench with you. And by the way, I do not believe in talent. I believe in hard work. I believe in good teaching, and I believe the ability to work hard is the biggest gift of all. A talented student may start here, another one may start here, but it's like the tortoise and the hare. If this one is working, following directions, I've seen it happen over and over again in my music classes, in my studio. I mentioned Alexander Malopev earlier because he happened to come to Yavapai College a few days ago. And I just want you to know that people like him do not deter us from having our musical careers. There are enough pianos in the world for all of us. And if you love it, never give up. I don't believe in sailed ships. I just got an agent a few weeks ago. I'm 64 years old. So most people my age are thinking about retiring, and I'm just praying that I don't get arthritis. So start doing your best work today. Thank you.
Thank you for a lovely presentation.
Thank you.
Such true and useful information for all of us on teaching and playing. And a lot of that our students have never heard in their lives. I don't know why you guys are so quiet.
Any questions, comments, thoughts?
Emily is usually shy with people that she's never met before, but the other students are. How did you go about, what were some of the steps, if you remember, from that experience where, when you realized, uh-oh, it was just an accident that I played so well? Because I actually don't know what I'm doing, and it's, sometimes it goes, sometimes it doesn't. What were some of the first steps you took?
Well, I realized that my complete approach to the piano was not correct. And I realized this by, I was also teaching at that time, and I had my students involved in local competitions, and we have very, very strong people in Connecticut. And I hated to admit it to myself, but there were little kids that were playing with better sound than I was. And I was like, I've got to figure out how they're doing this. And then I went back to school. I studied with a lot of, various people, not so much on a regular basis, but like one of the things I found out before I performed Lis Totentanz was that, I have a very mushy hands, and I had to learn something that a lot of people do naturally, which is like I needed to, again, something that you'd never say to a student, I needed to stiffen up my fingers to really get the sound, you know, where it's supposed to be really fortissimo. And anytime there was somebody that did something better than I did, I went to them for a lesson and asked, even if it was just one aspect that they did better than me. And so I had to really be very humble in my approach, because I had to realize that all these people had things that were better than what I had. That wasn't to say that I didn't have anything good. I'd like to think I had something good. But yeah, I tell my students, if you hear anybody that's better than you, ask them, you know, what they're doing.
Let me ask a follow-up. So you said that your approach to practicing wasn't right. Can you explain what you mean by that, and then maybe
I think
some concrete
well,
examples of how you...
as you know, like, you know, I started out with reading the Bobbsey twins while I was practicing. That wasn't good. But I think even like, you know, I wasn't aligned and balanced. And believe it or not, when I took up the organ, that was actually very helpful, because you cannot be swinging your feet around. When I first tried it, after 20 minutes, I could barely walk home from organ practice because my legs were going like this. So I know that I'm a big advocate of the organ because I feel like it helped me so much. And I know that Schumann had all his students also study the organ. It also helps you hear, you know, the lines, you know, all the voices, and it has helped my Bach playing. And yeah, I just went to various people and worked on my sitting. I worked on, you know, getting the bridge of my hand, because I was kind of going like this. I was, you name it, I was doing it. So it's been a long road, but a very interesting and inspiring one. Yes?
Who's your favorite composer?
Whoever I'm playing. I love all of it. I really do. I've been recording a lot of Bach lately. I belong to this club, and we record Bach weekly, whether it's ready or not. So, so you try to get it ready because we're putting it up on YouTube if it better sound decent. And yeah, I am going to be performing for Latvian ambassadors in Washington, D.C. next month. So I am currently learning some works by Latvian composers, and that's been interesting, discovering some beautiful music there that I didn't know about.
Do you compose any of your own music?
I actually do. I have composed some pedagogical pieces, and the reason is I had some students playing some curling. Da 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 da, and then the next one, da 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 da. And I just thought, this is like not so interesting. How did this thing ever even get published? So I just kind of took what I thought were the benefits of that, and I put them in a set of what I call recital etudes. So if you learn it and you need to perform somewhere, you have something you can play for people. I also have composed some organ pieces, because sometimes it's easier just to compose something or make an arrangement than to go hunting for something and buy it, wait for it to come in, or so, you know, as you're listening to yourselves really hard, you'll find that you have the tools to compose anything because the vocabulary is right there. And it's, speaking of that, something else that I have found is, after playing the really large works, don't you find that when you go back to the books of first classics, all of a sudden, it's like, yes, that's like this huge work. Of course, it doesn't really sound anything like it, but it teaches some little aspect And that's a connection that I have found really cool, is, looking at a little Bartok piece or a little Schumann piece, the Soldier's March, and then thinking of all those great Schumann works and how he may have thought that that would get somebody on the first rung of the ladder.
Do you happen to have any insights into motivating students to practice in a group piano setting?
Yes. I have found that it's much more motivating in a group setting. And my students have told me that. I don't know how many students you are thinking about, but it all started with my Zoom piano class during COVID. And this is actually pretty funny because there were like retirees in there, and I didn't think that they would be like competitive anymore. But they told me afterwards it was very motivating for them as I went around the Zoom circle. They would be practicing silently, and then I would call them, but they did not want anybody else in the Zoom circle to think that they were better than they were. So I found that really, really interesting. And also, I know that Dr. Magruju has master classes weekly, right? Do you have a weekly master class?
Studio class, yeah.
It's like a master class, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, and I'm not a full-time employee, so I do it once in a great while when I can find an hour I can spare. And when I have done it, people have told me they're extremely inspired. Just being there with their peers and having to play. In Connecticut, I did used to have group classes like before a student recital where I would have them kids play for each other. We're talking about little children. Little children don't get as well. I guess maybe it depends on the personality. Is that what you were asking about?
I was asking about college students, but that's just, class.
Don't you just kind of feed off of each other?
I suppose, but on their own?
He's not talking about this context, he's talking about group piano.
Or non-piano.
Oh, like what I used to talk to you about.
Yeah. He's the graduate assistant.
Yes.
Oh.
That's why.
Yeah, that was my Zoom class.
Ah,
And are your students college age students then?
yes.
Because mine are mixed. I have retirees too. Yeah, I find that they start competing with each other. But see, I should tell you, I have a very different group piano setup because our dean took the piano lab out. I could swear I am the only person in the world teaching group piano lab. So I have 2 grand pianos in my piano room, and I have them come in. I have 5 people in the class, and every 2 weeks we work on a certain key, and I just go around the circle, play the F major vocalise, play the F major scale, play the F major arpeggio, play the 1-4-1-5-7-1, and they don't want to look bad. So I don't know, maybe if you're in a piano lab and they have the headphones on and nobody hear what anybody's doing.
That is generally the setting, yes.
Okay, take the headphones off.
I do that sometimes, yes.
Because nobody wants to look bad. That's what I've discovered. So I don't know if you want to try that or not. This year I have the best group piano classes I have ever had. I don't even know how that happened. But I have some retirees that are so strong, they're pushing the young people, because it's supposed to be the old people that are getting old and decrepit and can't function and having atrophying brains and stuff like that. But they have really been pushing. And then I try to pass out pretty pieces that really have nothing to do with group piano, just because it gets them over there to play, because then they have something they can show off for their families. I have some doing 6-handed music, and that's a really good thing, because again, you don't want to be the weak link bringing down the whole trio. I have some doing duets. And if they do well, then I invite them to perform on one of our brown bag recitals. So if somebody aspires to be a good student, they have some goals. So, but you know, I think a lot depends on the personalities that are in there. I know when I first started, I used to talk to your teacher back there because I was like, they were awful, and they behaved like middle schoolers. Fortunately, that didn't last. So, anything else?
I was wondering if you could explain your musical lineage, because I just think that's a fun fact, like how it leads back to, you know?
Yes.
I know it was in your bio,
Beethoven
but.
taught Kearney, taught Liszt, taught Martin Krauss, taught Claudio Rao, taught Joseph Villa, taught me, taught you. And I have the lineage on the Leshetitsky side as well through Lou Crowder and Luis Zamora Castro. So my three most influential teachers all descended from Beethoven and Czerny. So hopefully something I'm saying has been around for a long time. Didn't get distorted in the passing down. But it's kind of a neat thing.
Well, thank you again.
Okay.
Such a pleasure to visit with you and to hear your stories and your advice for the students and for us. And hope it won't be too long before we see each other again.
Yes. I'm sorry, I think tonight I have to head back because I start out so early in the morning and I've got to still have put in grades and get ready for the concert. Canvas, I hate Canvas. So, because I have a mixed class, I have a mixed level class. So that means that I have piano 1, 2, 3, and 4 in one class. When I put in their grades, I have to put the assignment in over and over and over again. So, yeah, that's why I don't like it.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Let's take a group picture.